To our first 2023. So, with allegiance.
Which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here.
Vice President Cook here. Commissioner Nash,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Tweed, here.
Modifications, additions, and changes to the agenda.
There is, I apologize, thought Casey was going to be joining us over Zoom, but since we have him here in person, I'd like to get into the top so we can get back on the road. So we'd like to take number 7. Let's put it after public comment in case we have anybody who's joined us just to offer a public comment, and then we'll go into number 7.
Perfect. Declarations of potential conflicts of interest for anyone here tonight?
No.
No, okay. Seeing none. Public comment. Have anybody? Anyone want to comment?
Online at least now.
Okay, good. Seeing none, we will move along. So we're going to front load our executive session under ORS 1922.660, legal counsel regarding litigation or likely litigation to be filed. We're going to adjourn for about 5 minutes, and we will holler at everybody when we're done. Back, all of these, I think it was a long meeting there, but we still serious stuff. So, with like 6 local broker and then, West Real Estate.
So we have Ann with us today. Ann is a commercial broker for real estate. She was responsible for bringing us to college as a potential tenant very early on when the Flex 6 first went vacant. We also have Darren from Tennyson Engineering on the line. And I think what we want to do is just sort of talk about Flex 6 again. I don't know if we're looking for necessarily any motions tonight as much as we want to understand what Flex 6 is, what potential there is to lease it to a single tenant, multiple tenants, what that would look like. If we were to divide it up, Darren can answer questions about that. So feel free to sort of direct the conversation the way you guys want it to go on this one, just mostly informative at this point. And we had previously, the previous commission had been unwilling to work with a broker on this. They wanted to keep it in-house. And so that is the direction that we had previously gone. Once we found the roundhouse, most of the focus was put onto that, bringing them in as tenants. Very little has been done throughout that in terms of continuing to market Flex 6. We do have it back up on LoopNet currently, so people do have the ability to find it through LoopNet, but that is the extent that we've accomplished in the last couple of weeks.
So where you're saying you don't want to be a real estate broker anymore?
I'm not saying I don't want to be. I'm sure we do fine, right?
Yeah, you do great.
Right. Sort of whether you want me to be a real estate broker or not.
You have to see.
But Ann, if you want to talk just about, you can go back as far as you want with the Cabo, your experience, what your thoughts are on Flex 6. This really is just sort of an informative meeting where you give us sort of what your perspective of having seen the building.
Okay, so yeah, Ann Menbach, Copper West Real Estate. I think you guys saw my CV, so I can go over that a little bit, but lots of public work as well as private sector work. So I've been in the commercial real estate industry since 2006. Starting in Bend and then moving up to the gorge, doing various aspects of commercial real estate. As far as Flex 6, you know, I've kind of seen the port sort of go through that whole, you know, construction process and renewal workshop and that whole thing. And DeCavo was a tenant that I was working with, trying to find space, and so we went through negotiations with the then commission at that time, and weren't able to get to a deal then. I have been with Copper West for about 2.5 years. So I left the Board of River back in 2021 and started commercial vision for Copper West. So I work with tenants, I work with landlords. I do sales, I do leasing. I'm licensed on both sides of the river. I'm a CCIM, which is a commercial investment manager, which is a designation that takes a certain level of deals to get to, as well as a lot of extensive education. So that's kind of my background there. As far as Flex 6 and talking about a strategy for potentially leasing that, which I understand is the port's priority, is to lease that. And of course, you know, leasing it to one tenant would be your best option. If you could find one tenant who could just take the whole thing on a long-term lease, that would be the best. I'm going to say that's not going to be an easy way to go. It's not going to be easy to attract that kind of tenant to Cascade Blocks. I talked to a number of brokers who have tenants that are of that size and caliber, and either they want a lease rate that isn't a lease rate that matches the port's needs, or they're not willing to come out to Cascade Blocks. I think there's a certain amount of work we can do to help those brokers get out here to really see how close Cascade Blocks is actually to the Portland metro area, and that really it's not that hard of a drive to come out here, and it's a beautiful building with a lot of amenities and a great community. So I think there's some work that that we could do. Part of the marketing strategy is, of course, not just LeadNet, but all the other sort of avenues that we have as commercial brokers. So there's a number of other sites that we can post it on, both locally, regionally, and nationally, that'll get us some exposure. I have a few different subscriptions to broker only type marketing paths, wherein, you know, the marketing goes directly to brokers and you can work directly with them. And then getting it out to contacts that I have through CCIM and other commercial brokerage listing services that I pay for. So there's all of those processes that we will focus on to try to get one big tenant to come out, barring that we're able to find one single tenant. You know, Darren and Jeremiah and I talked through some options of potentially demising the building. So we can talk through that and how that typically works in the industry, which usually the landlord waits until they have tenants in hand to do any sort of improvements, because they don't know what's needed until those tenants show up. So, you know, potentially able to demise that building, and 2 to 3 to maybe 4, Darren, and I'll defer to you. It depends on what those tenants need, but coming up with a strategy with you and staff on how you would want to demise that and what that would look like with, you know, if you've got 4 different tenants and we have 3 and 5 year leases, how do you want that to work? Do you just lease it out to one and then hope you're going to lease out the rest of it to other tenants? And so there's some strategy behind that on, you know, what kind of interest we get and what kind of time frame the court has to get the building leased out. And then it sounds like the last option you're thinking about is, should none of that work and, you know, not able to lease it up, then a potential sale, but that's way down the road. And we look at that building filled up again. Well, we do that. So I think that's all I have for
kind of had, few of us at one point discussed the option of demising the building, and, you know, like I said, there's kind of, in some ways, of course, it makes it easier to lease because of smaller spaces, but also drawing down further on our loan kind of compounding problem, because then our square foot price, which is already kind of out of the median as far as pricing, brings it further out of the scope of what people want to pay. So it's kind of a tough balance to find. And also, like you said, if you divide it down into 10,000 square foot spaces, and somebody says, well, I want 15, you know, now you know, so it's best if you find a tenant who wanted a specific part of the building. As we got with DeCabo, which was essentially gonna be leasing 2/3 of the building. And would leave basically the less developed part of the space left as warehouse space, which in my mind would have been easy then to potentially find a client for, but that's water under the bridge. But
Having seen the space, and I guess with your like, history, are there specific industries that seem like they'd be more viable to be a single tenant person there?
Yeah, I mean, the aerospace industry is one of those, but, you know, they're, kind of few and far between, as we know. And they like to be, unfortunately, they want to be in the central porch, a little bit farther, you know, that way. But I think that's an industry that, you know, we want to go after, as well as biotech. And potentially, some food production and manufacturing, because it's such a big, beautiful, clean building that's got all the things that food manufacturing may need, and there's a lot of value added, you know, food manufacturing happening here in the gorge. However, there would have to be some maybe significant changes to the building to make that happen. And then just straight, you know, warehouse for the warehouse space. Everybody needs it, but that's going to be your lowest value space, and so you don't want to give that up and then have your, you know, your highest lease rate space still vacant.
Right.
I know Brim is across the street. What about other breweries or other?
Yeah, which would fall into the, sorry, food and beverage,
Yeah,
or production, manufacturing, and we would definitely go after that industry. So a targeted approach with the marketing to go after those industries specifically, and then out to brokers and everybody else.
So I guess, forgive me if I missed this, but so you helped bring DeCabo, but then Roundhouse was someone completely different. Do we need to bring you back? Like what's the, I guess the question?
So typically, no question, right? Mostly it's a discussion. So DeCabo, she brought DeCabo to us. We did not, she found us, she found the building.
Okay.
At that time, the commission was unwilling to demise the building, not rent to just a single tenant. And they were also not willing to work with a broker. So it became mostly about a financial choice that they were making, that they didn't want to pay the broker fees, and also they wanted that single tenant. So she found us. At this point in time, there's a question now whether we're interested in working with a broker, and if we are, then that gives me some direction to find a broker for the board. Right? Basically, I need a consensus that yeah, we should be exploring all options versus what currently exists, which is the port trying to find somebody to lease that.
Yeah.
And then if you have questions on how that actual representation works, we can talk about that, you know, as well later on.
I guess as far as breaking up, or I guess demise is the official term for that. It sounds like it would just all be dependent upon who those respective tenants would be.
That would be my suggestion, rather than, you know, doing that right now and then hoping somebody comes and spending a bunch of money that you don't know is gonna fit someone's need or not.
Right.
Hard thing is our location, partly because not having a workforce, you know, a robust workforce. In fact, that was one of the claims kind of that, Renewal Workshop made, was that they had a hard time finding staffing. And so that's a challenge in our area.
Should at least in got a whole bunch of new houses.
There you go. Yeah.
That's also beneficial. I mean, your building is, you do have some space that is designed for higher occupancy load. And again, Darren can talk to this, and then, you know, about half the building that's designed for warehouse.
Right.
So really you look at that and kind of how many employees you could have in there, or what kind of industries need a lot of employees. And the industries I mentioned typically are high employee industries, but some of them, you know, maybe they need employees for one thing and then the rest is storage and warehouse, and that fits with your, you know, your current layout of the building.
I feel like with the time sensitivity of the Flex 6 building sitting vacant, it kind of warrants a pretty swift decision, though, about at least moving forward with a decision to work with a broker, not specifically the ins and outs of the broker contract necessarily tonight, but even though the presentation was tonight, I think it's something that maybe we could consider also voting on. Just to say, hey, let's move forward with the idea of working with a broker.
I wouldn't even necessarily need to vote on that. If you guys, as a consensus, see this as the direction you'd like to see the general manager go. It would fall with, that would fall within something I could do with the general consensus. If you didn't, there wasn't, then maybe we probably should, but.
Right, okay, well, if there's no motion needed, then that's fine.
Let's get people in
You
there.
guys feel the
Yeah,
same way?
I'm in agreement. I think Flex 6 is one of our priorities for the remainder of the year, and we definitely need to get someone in there soon. We've been waiting too long on it, and just the interest is building up, so I think it's gonna be able, bringing in a broker is gonna definitely accelerate that new tenant, so.
Perfect, let's start working on that.
Brian has enough to do outside of his regular duties rather than becoming a broker. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm gonna just
Thank
go ahead and go. So
Yeah.
nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah, you too.
So the next we have our next is Moss Adams, and we have, and she's still with us, Andy Rose. Hi, good to see you. Since you can get it on mute. So.
Can you hear me now?
We can. So we have started our strategic business plan that started back in February. There hasn't been much, any work done on it since then, at least with the board. I think we've done quite a bit of work on the back end of it. But we kind of come to a place now where the commission needs to sort of see where the current one is and what the strategy is for finishing it or starting over, which I think is also something we could potentially do. We also need to look at a strategy of whether you guys are interested in getting it going right now, or you'd like to maybe spend 6 months understanding the port a little bit better, understanding what our problems are, understanding the fires, and getting some of that under your belt before you start building a strategic business plan. And lucky for us, Annie's been in this position before, so she can speak to strategic business plan being built by a new entity, and she can also speak to the benefits of us maybe waiting for 6 months. So thank you for waiting. I apologize that I stuck you in the waiting room. You're on mute, but maybe we haven't muted or we haven't muted. Okay.
Great, thank you. So, hello, thank you so much for having me tonight. I have a short presentation that we can go through, just covering some of the highlights in terms of what we have done in this strategic planning process up to this point, and then sort of teeing it up so that we can have a discussion around where you all would like to take this work moving forward. So I'm going to share my, can I share my screen actually? That's possible. Says it's disabled for me. So I can either just talk through it, or if we can get the screen sharing up, I can share it from there. What's going to be easiest?
We're working on share screen.
Great.
Should be able to do it now.
Great. Thank you. All right. So for the strategic planning update, just really setting the background here. So as you probably already know, the port is required to maintain a strategic business plan, and that is best practice for an entity like this anyways. And typically these types of plans lay out and say, okay, here's the major activities that we think the port's going to be engaged in the next 5 to 10 years. And the goal of this work is really to say, here are what our priorities are as a leadership team, and then here's practically how we're going to achieve those priorities. And so we see this as the type of plan that we really have to rely on both the commissioners to be providing all of the strategic guidance and saying, here's the vision, and really setting that work. work, but it's also the type of plan where we really incorporate expertise from the staff and the management team as well, because they are your experts in the how you will actually achieve any of these goals. And so we always like to have this be a collaborative process. And I'm realizing it says city up here and it should say port. But regardless, it should be a collaborative process where we can actually bring together input from various groups. And then the third group here that's very important as well are community stakeholders. The port is here to serve the community, and so we want to be able to get their input on where we headed as well. And we always want this type of plan. It does have certain aspects that are very big picture, very visionary, but we also want it to be practical so that you can actually take it. It's not going to sit on a shelf, but you can actually use that to guide on an annual basis. What are the priorities that we're going to be focused on? So when we think about what goes into a strategic plan, typically what we'll see just in terms of the actual structure of the document, you'll have some type of vision, mission statement, sometimes you have value statements, but these are the really, really big picture, broad foundational pieces that you put in place saying, this is why we exist as a port, this is our vision of what we are hoping to see in the community if we can achieve our work, and here's how we're going to go about doing it. Then you have your strategic goals that lay out here the big picture areas that we're going to be looking at and focused on in the next 5 to 10 years. And then underneath each goal, setting out specific objectives and actions that will be taken in order to accomplish those large goals. And finally, you always want performance measures in here as well, so that as a port, you can say, okay, we know we're on track or off track with the work that we have set out for ourselves. So when I'm saying a strategic plan, that is typically what I am referencing. Oftentimes the documents have additional information, sort of contextual information, background information, pieces that might go into why we made certain decisions, but this is really at the core of what we want to see in every strategic plan. So in terms of the planning process, I'm going to take you through. We did kick off this process in February. We started with, we did a big document request. We had interviews with each of the individual commissioners at that point. We also had management and staff interviews. And we did some community stakeholder input right at the beginning there as well. Then we brought all of that information together and we had our first commissioner work session, and that was really focused on mission, vision, and goal setting. Coming out of that, we worked with the individual commissioners and the management team to create some draft goal areas, objectives, and actions. We started putting together different pieces of the plan, and we sent that for management input and then commissioner input. And that's really where this process stopped. And then we put a pause on it, given the transition of your commissioner team. And so you'll see the remaining pieces that we have here are to incorporate any input, get actual stakeholder community input on the draft plan. Typically what that looks like is putting up an online survey, having a community open house so that people can come and ask questions and provide input. And then we'd want to take anything that came out of that and make updates, get a final round from management and commissioners in terms of how the updates have been incorporated before the plan would actually be approved for adoption. So I want to walk you through. That is the typical process that we see for this type of work. As I said, that green highlighted box is where this process, we put a pause on this work at that point. And so anything after that, we have not completed as of today. So in terms of how you can move forward, you have a couple options, and we've certainly seen this with some of the other teams that we work with. My team works exclusively with public sector clients doing this type of strategic planning work. So you are not the first team I have run into where you have a major transition in leadership sort of midway through this process. And we've seen two different paths that you can take. The first would be just to move forward with the current strategic plan draft as it is. And as I was showing on the last slide, the next steps would be to get community input on that draft and then move forward to a work session to adopt it. Now, having this option on the table, I will say, I think that this doesn't give this leadership team really an opportunity to weigh in and help shape the plan. And this is a plan that's going to be with you for the next at least 5 years. And so I think that that would be challenging to go with option one, because it wouldn't really give you all an opportunity to weigh in on this work in a substantive manner. The second option that we have here is to essentially restart the strategic planning process. We wouldn't have to start from scratch because we have all the contextual details. Our team is familiar with the port's operations and some of the priorities that would be coming out. But basically, we would go back and start and hold an initial work session with you all. We would go back, revisit mission, vision, values with you. We would do interviews with each one of you to understand what your priorities might look like, and then go through the rest of the process as I had laid out. But that really would essentially be going back to maybe not that first row of activities, but at least the second row in terms of going back to an earlier point in this process so that you all can actually weigh in on this work. If you do choose option two, there will be two pathways here as well. One option would be to start that work today. Our team is ready. We can jump in, we can get going, we can get things on the calendar and get you started on the strategic planning process. The benefit of that would obviously be that you would have a strategic plan sooner rather than later, which may be beneficial because it would help guide that work. The drawback of that is that I'm sure you are all, as coming into, for those of you who are new into your roles, there's a lot of information to take in and digest as part of it, and it can be challenging to be taking in all of that new information and trying to do planning work at the same time. So the secondary option here would be to essentially restart the process in 4 to 6 months estimate, but the idea being, let's give the team some time to actually fully onboard, to get your hands wrapped around the port's operations, some of the priorities, some of those pieces before engaging in some of this planning work. I think that you're in year 8 out of year 10. By the end of year 10, you need to have that new strategic plan in place in order to be in compliance. So you do have some time, but I will say too, strategic planning processes do typically take about 6 months start to finish to complete. But that would still give you plenty of time if you did choose option 2B to kind of restart the process in 4 to 6 months. That would still give you plenty of time to get this work done, get the new plan in place so that you could be compliant there as well. So that is the end of my spiel here. I'm really curious to hear if there's any questions about the process to this point, or if there's any other thoughts or feedback on where this team sees y'all headed in terms of your options for moving forward with the planning process.
I guess I'll ask the obvious one. Can we see the current strategic plans?
What I was gonna ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure we can share the draft plan as it is. It is still certainly in draft form, but we can share the version that we have now.
Also, the second question, if we restart the process, how much additional cost is this, or is this already paid for?
So there will be additional cost to it, and that's a question I expected to come up, so we'll work on that as well. I did sort of assume this was gonna get retooling somehow, so it has been budgeted for. But we'll sort of see the direction you guys are leaning, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and the second question is, do you work with the city of Cascade Locks as well, or in the past?
I have not. I know that they're going through a strategic planning process as well right now, and one of the goals for this was certainly be able to at least work with what's coming out of their strategic planning process so that the two plans can be aligned with each other.
Yeah, I believe August 25th, there's going to be a community barbecue where it's the 3rd annual one, but they're going to do a community survey, and it's a lot of valuable local citizen input.
Yeah, and that would be fantastic to be able to incorporate that in. And I've been speaking with Jordan Bennett throughout this process to see how we might be able to leverage those types of things. That's great.
I would say that it appears as a commission, we have a very specific idea of, I think, the direction that we're headed, and it is working tightly with the community and with the city. And we have some specific goals in mind, I think, as far as these are all these commissioners are pretty quick, steady, and I think they are very involved in the community and have a good idea of where we're headed as far as quality of life, and that's the big thing, is quality of life that the community wants long term, and what that means as far as development goals. But I think it's up to them, but I think the sooner we get going, the better. I think we do need to, for the most part, you know, certainly look at what was done by the previous commission, but we'll probably be starting at square one just about, because I think we have some very specific ideas of where we're headed, and that might not be totally in alignment with what the previous commission was doing.
I have a question. What do we have to lose, or is there any risk if we pause for a couple of months?
That's a great question. From my perspective, I don't think that there are major risks. You're not going to fall out of compliance with the plan. I think you have some very specific operational priorities that Jeremiah is leading right now that you're going to need to accomplish no matter what. So I don't think that there's major things in that sense that, you know, I'd be concerned if this process waited another 4 to 6 months here. So I don't have major concerns from my perspective as a facilitator in this type of work. I think it would be absolutely reasonable to take a pause there. I think the primary drawback is that you wouldn't have the plan in place, that you'd be waiting another 6 months to get that plan in place. I think the benefit, though, would certainly be making sure that you all had sufficient time to really, really get into some of the port operations here, because while some of the goals are very high level, and we would expect you to be providing some of that high level sort of policy direction, especially within port work, it gets very technical very quickly as well, because all of those decisions have very technical implications when it comes to how they actually work in reality. And so that would be my only concern restarting right now, is just making sure that everyone feels really good and has that really solid foundation with port operations, so that when you're making these decisions, you have a really good understanding of what are those implications.
Yeah, we don't.
To the pleasure of the commission.
We definitely don't have to resolve this. We'll look in our action meeting. I will get the plan set out so you guys have a chance to look at that. I'll send some information about what the costs look at it, and then we'll look for a motion next week to direct that, 2 weeks to direct that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Mr. Mark Johnson. I'm only sort of sorry I thought you
So, Commissioner, good to be with you tonight. Some various topics to cover. We'll start off talking about the Bridge of the Gods, which of course is the major asset of Port of Cascade Locks. We had a really good meeting today. Albert was there, Jeremiah was there, with Senator Curtis King, who is lives in Yakima. He represents that part of Washington, comes down from Yakima down to the Columbia. I think he's got Yakima County and Skamania County, but he used to be directly across the river from us here. With redistricting, they shifted him east, but he used to have Stevenson, Skamania County, and so forth. So he's well acquainted with the Bridge of the Gods. He's been a great friend of the court, and a great advocate for our issues up in Washington. But wanted to catch up with him after the Oregon legislature adjourned and some of the disappointment we experienced there with the funding for our seismic project that didn't come through. He's been following that and keeping him up to speed on it, and he understands how politics can operate somehow. But this was about thinking about moving forward. So we talked about how we can position ourselves for success as we go through the fall months leading up to early 2024, when both Oregon and Washington are going to have their short legislative sessions. Oregon has a 35-day session, Washington has a 60-day session, so short, but they each represent opportunities to be able to get the funding for that seismic analysis and strengthening project that we've been trying to get the money for. Again, just for your information, we're asking each state for this new amount, $6 million from Oregon, $6 million from Washington, for the total total of 12 that will allow us to do a deep dive on the seismic resiliency of the bridge as it exists. Nobody did that in 1926. We have no idea what kind of soils are underneath those columns or what kind of, just how things are looking. But we'll learn that with that investment. We'll also be able to do some targeted improvements, physical improvements to the bridge as well to make it more seismically healthy. But also it'll allow us to know, not us, it's the smart people in the room, the David McCurry's and the engineers, to be able to put a price tag on the rest of the work that ultimately will get us to where we can get that bike bed crossing across here that everybody wants to have. So the big focal point in the short term is coming up is going to be on September 27th. And I think I mentioned in the last meeting that the Washington Joint Transportation Committee is coming through the gorge. They're in a process of studying all the interstate bridges from Astoria to the Dalles, but they'll be here in the gorge on September 27th for a luncheon in Hood River, and we're going to be presenting to them there. And then they'll also be making a stop back here in Cascade Locks on their return back to Vancouver. We talked about how we can try to leverage that opportunity to maximize it for positive contact with the people we need to be connecting with. We'll also have great support from our new Representative Waters across in Skamania County, Representative Harris, Senator Linda Smith. That's kind of our Washington block across the river, if you will. But one of the other things I want to do, and I've made some phone calls and I think this is going to work, is trying to get some of our Oregon legislators to meet with them as well. Because we need to get that cross pollination so the folks from Salem can say, we're going to do this. So Washington can say, all right, you're going to do that and we're going to do this. And, we'll meet in the middle on that and so forth. So that's the hope. And I think we're in good, as Albert had a chance to meet him. Curtis King's a straight shooter, great guy, very serious about policy and stuff. And it's just, it's good to have those relationships. So that was helpful. We're also in the short term, I think you guys have mentioned PCT days perhaps here recently too. That's coming up soon. The Pacific Crest Trail Association is really pushing hard to support our bridge ask as well with their members. I was just talking to Mark Larrabee, their communications guy today. They've got a blog they're going to start put up on their webpage. It's going to be all about what we're trying to accomplish here. But we're also really going to try to leverage PCT days. And I'm sorry, I don't have enough to go around for everybody. I had 5, really gave Curtis King one today, so I'm down to 4, so you'll have to share. But anyway,
It's all right,
we're going to have a booth. The port will have a booth, and the PCTA will have a booth, and we're each going to be gathering signatures from participants that are going to go to the Oregon Senate President and the Speaker of the House. We're going to try to get as many of these as we can, and then we will deliver these during the September Legislative Day session, which are the 2 days after that meeting on the 27th. So it's going to be a great opportunity, and I've extended personal invitations of both the Senate President and the Speaker to attend PCT days. It's a fun thing. If you get these guys out of Portland to come see this kind of stuff, they're going to say, wow, that is cool to see 5,000 people in Cascade Locks, just excited about outdoor recreation. So anyway, wanted to get an idea for the real hands-on, push we're trying to do to contact with the right people on our issues so we can be successful in these February sessions. And we're not questions on that.
Yeah, this is specifically, obviously, focused on Oregon.
Yep.
Should there be another option for adding Washington in it as well?
Well, as you heard from Senator King today, all roads really kind of lead to Salem. It's unlikely Washington's going to step up and write us a check before Oregon does. That's kind of how we're looking at it. You can understand why the bridge is owned by an Oregon-owned port or an Oregon port, with Washington come in and anyway, that's been the focal point. We've done a lot of advocacy, and we certainly can share these. We could parcel out the if they're Washington constituents, highlight those. We can disseminate those too. We'll figure out a way to do that. And if we could actually, make mention of this at the meeting on the 27th too, we could show them, look at that. 500, 600,000, I don't know how many, it's just look at what we've got here in our hand. These people would say, this is really, and that's where he was talking about. Transportation funding is kind of, the nuts and bolts, the roads, the infrastructure, that kind of stuff. But Washington has a separate pot of money for multimodal, which covers a whole range of stuff that covers things like bike ped crossings or overpasses and stuff like that too. So it's just a way to kind of broaden the appeal for what we're gonna be doing, so. But
As far as the funds that we're getting from Washington and Oregon, do they all have to be allocated strictly for earthquake retrofitting, or can some of those go towards some of the research for that future bike path and stuff?
Well, that will come out of that investment for that total 12 million, our engineer will be able to, again, he'll do the engineering to know how much additional reinforcing the bridge will need in order to be able to support that weight, because again, that bridge wasn't designed to have anything hanging off the side of it, so we don't know the answers to that yet. Don't know yet whether hanging something off the side is the best way to go too. I heard David McCurry say that, well, we can put a narrow lane right between the two lanes and shift those things over a bit. So that's up to those smart people that play around on their computers all day and crunch numbers and stuff like that. So anyway, that's the update on that stuff. We've been approached, the port's been approached by the folks that manage the Hood County Energy Plan, and that's probably another topic we'll need to get you guys up to speed on. The port does support that work with an annual contribution, but it's about adding EV chargers to the new parking lot up on Harvey Road. I had a good phone call yesterday with Lindsay McClure, who's heading up. The Hood County Energy Plan is housed at McCad in the Dalles. So that's where it's based here locally, but there's a company, an EV promotions company called Fourth that is in charge of helping ODOT to get monies out the door to locate EV chargers across the whole state of Oregon. So they know about our parking lot. They think our parking lot would be a great option, a great location for having access to EV chargers. Unfortunately, I don't know if Darren's still on the call or not up there. He has to go. But, when that parking lot was designed, we put in the infrastructure to support EV charging stations. So there's a panel there. You'll see an electrical panel on that, be the southeast corner, I think. All it needs is a meter in there and a breaker or two. So the conduit goes out to a couple different locations where we can locate up to 4 EV chargers. So that's the good news. What we found out yesterday is ODOT still has about $683,000 left to use in this biennium that's been allocated for EV chargers in Oregon. The cost or the grant amounts would be up to $4,250 per port or per charging station, or up to 75% of the total cost, whichever is less there apparently. I don't know, what we don't know yet is what the cost will be. Darren gave me some recommendations on some electrical firms that do this work locally. We can talk to them, what's the cost, one of them actually would be the outfit that actually put in the conduit and stuff down there, work with the contractor, which would be an
EV chargers also charge e-bikes, which are getting to be
no,
things.
no. They'll be plugged in your garage. So you have to do a minimum of 2 chargers to qualify for this grant program, and you can't do more than 7. So because we have infrastructure in place for 4, that would seem to say that we would fit right in the sweet spot there. We would have adequate capacity, Darren says, for up to 4. So the question is, I guess, from the commission, you want me to continue to run down and fine tune the cost on this? It's something that we can move on relatively quickly. The other consideration to throw out there, and this is what I was talking to Darren about yesterday, if you've been up there, you'll notice that we already have 2 ADA required spots, which we're required to do just to be in compliance. There's 30 spots total, 30 or 32, Darren, I forget. I can see at least the need for 2. If you have more than that, then you potentially could have 6 of your 30 spots that are out of commission unless somebody has a handicap sticker or they drive an EV that wouldn't be able to be used. I just want the commission to think about that. If there's a finite number of parking spots up there, how many do you want to dedicate? You could expand later, because the infrastructure is in place. You want to start with 2, you could do that. If it's really popular, you can expand it.
We've only got 1 currently in them.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'm just, but what I can bring you back at the next meeting, let's just say, would be just the cost would be, because the port will have some money in the game here. We'll have some money we have ARPA money would be able to be used for this.
ideally what you would do is whoever does the installation, you would have a maintenance contract with them because the port doesn't want to be in the business of maintaining EV chargers. So usually you have a 2 or 3 year, 5-year plan for whatever that is, and I won't be part of that deal. So it's kind of exciting. It's promising. There's the other thing I'll throw out, and you were talking about it before the meeting, but signage is going to be really important up there in the short term because there's no shortage of vehicles looking for places to park for extended periods of time, and I don't think the port wants to be in that business yet, but anyway, so I'll bring back some information so you guys have information on port on the costs. The last item is kind of a random one that came to us. With the port received a letter, an email from a member of the CGRA, Plumbing Guard Racing Association, about they would like to be able to have races that involve larger sailboats than the ones that they currently use. Usually they're
The melges, they had the melges, but that was always an issue getting them in and out of the water. So that's the issue is having a lift.
Well, I don't know about a lift, but they're looking for another docking location. The Portland Yacht Club is apparently replacing their docks, which are wooden docks, with concrete docks or something like that, but Portland Yacht Club, but they've agreed to make their current dock available to CGRA at no price. If TGRA can haul it down here, but they need a place to moor it.
I talked to them about this on 4th of July, actually.
The east,
They're looking at government code.
the government cove, port property, was already slated for, at one point, we had a plan for an east side marina.
Well,
We can get the docks for free,
there's
worth seeing what it would cost.
there's more to it than that.
Well,
And
yeah,
that the port technically owns the property, but the water is a state resource.
okay, so yeah, that was the other question.
So the agency that would have first jurisdiction on this is the Department of State Lands, and I've talked with their local director. I don't think the permitting is a large thing, but they have a combined permit that would go to DSL, Department of State Lands. It also goes to the Army Corps of Engineers. It also goes to Oregon DEQ, because all of those folks might have some input about citing that out there. What the proposal would be from CGRA is to kind of nudge that deteriorating log raft further west, I think, get it out of the way and see if they could moor that somehow to the existing pilings that are close to.
It's too bad. So I think Bob Sorek owns, did he buy that property from, Good River Sand and Gravel? Because there's actually acreage there in the water that has the pilings. So that's actually owned by
Bob Sorek.
Bob Sorek from, Bear Mountain and Smoky Mountain Logistics. And whether that be a possibility, because that he actually owns some of the water there along with the pilings. So
Well, there's a host of issues involved as I look at it. I mean, their need for it would be simply during their race season, which is usually June, July, and so forth. The rest of the year it could be a public asset.
yeah,
The question would be, who's gonna be responsible for that? Who has liability for that?
Yeah.
Is it a port asset? Is it a CGRA asset? Is it a community asset? So I'm just throwing it out before you so you can think about this. I don't think you have to jump on this right away, but in my mind, I mean, Brad, you're right. There was an old kind of recreation development plan that I've seen. I know we can pull it up, but this might be the time for the port to put some resources into, or there are multitudes of grants that we could apply for, like development planning grants. But it seems to me that this might, I'm just speaking for myself here, this might be the time for the port to start looking at a master plan. So whatever you do with that isn't just kind of a hodgepodge of development. Because there's no beach access, there's
that
no.
east side development, I have a feeling is gonna be part of our strategic business plan.
Well, there's that, exactly,
Is,
right.
Those few conversations that we've had in that regard. Have been, I think we feel like that is a prime piece of development property there for recreation. And something like that would just give it more reason to be developed.
Agreed. So that's kind of where we're at. We've got approach to there's potential, but I think there's just a lot of things to think through, I guess, before we do CGRA, the green light, the tow dock up here and hang it out there. It's gonna be, everybody's gonna see it, everybody driving down 84 is gonna say, well, who owns that thing? You want them calling the port? I don't know, I'm just saying, think through.
What is the timing for them to?
I think it's this season. I think that probably it's within the next, I would say within the fall, probably, because they want, I don't know whether Port Yacht Club has a way to tie the thing up down there somewhere, temporarily, but and I didn't ask exactly the dimensions of this thing. I can get that information too. I'm not sure how large it is, but I'm guessing it's a pretty good size.
We'll get a hold of, PNWA and say, hey, Schaefer coming back down the river after it's down below.
But it'll be a conversation starter for sure, to plop that thing out there, but again, I just think there's a lot of things to be thought about with liability and access and so forth, and who owns it, and who's gonna control it.
Right.
Something goes, whatever, so that's the last one I have. So I'll bring you back more information there, but I just really wanted to, if you have any other comments, or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'll tell you more than that. So,
Thank you.
okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Alrighty. Discussion. Port Commission Secretary and or Treasurer.
So currently Albert remains our secretary and treasurer. There was some talk about potentially someone taking one of those roles. It could stay the way it currently is. It could change. This would be a time for us to do that if we wanted to, or for you to at least think about it and know that I'm definitely going to want an action at the next meeting. So I can cross it off the list and be done with it. We don't have to do it tonight. If somebody's chomping at the bit, not great. If not, we can think about it.
I would like to have the next board meeting be as fast as possible, so if we want to have this be done today,
And that is, it's not a pressing issue.
It is Albert.
It is Albert.
No, I mean, the next meeting that we have will be during PCD days, so I want to make sure that we're as
So in general,
Oh, I see.
I think this.
That's a Tuesday?
No,
there'll still be plenty of folks around.
Oh, you're talking about the week.
Yeah.
Generally, I think the new format, the way that we're handling things is gonna allow for that, because the second action meetings will be fairly quick, especially if I've done my job, to get you the information you asked for in order to be able to make those decisions, right? We've already kind of heard through it, we've talked about it, you went home and slept on it, you needed a few things answered. Now I've sent it to you during the week, presented it at the meeting. We should be able to move to those fairly quick. We moved through some pretty dense topics tonight. We're only at 2 hours. I know we're pushing to get to 2 hour meetings. I think if we hadn't had that heavy executive session, we probably would have done it.
Right.
I don't think a bunch of action items, my hope is a bunch of action items won't mean a long meeting. It'll just be more productive if we just rock through them.
get it done.
I mean, I'm fine with continuing to be secretary if one of you wants to take treasurer.
I have experiences being a treasurer for a nonprofit, so I'm open to stepping that role if you guys wish.
Yes.
I'm.
We need a formal motion.
We need a motion.
We got a motion in a second.
Yes.
To make Rob Peterson the treasurer and keep Albert as secretary.
Fantastic.
That,
Yeah.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're good? Okay.
Fantastic. The next two would be the Cascade Locks Historical Museum Board and the Energy Council representative. Again, I don't need anybody to step up and say, hey, I would love to do this, but it is in your packet. They are going to request somebody. You do have the ability to say, we don't have anybody from the board who's interested or has the time. I want Jeremiah to fill into that position, and I will.
I was gonna say, based on Pam's profession and outside of here, she might be interested in the Energy Council.
I thought you said the museum board.
That's.
Well,
fair.
We're doing-
And I would volunteer for the museum board.
We just-
I would be interested in that.
Okay,
And
yeah, so we want to make that motion.
Do we want to decide tonight, or do you want to read it over the
I wanna
stuff
look
in
at
the
it.
packet?
Okay.
We can do that.
We'll come back to that.
I'm interested.
As far as the rest of the potential boards, I'm assuming Jeremiah's briefed all of you on kind of our new format. I get the feeling for the time being, we'll just kind of table some of those other boards. I think it'll be important that we keep the board for the
Subcommittees.
well, yeah, advisory board for subcommittees. For the bridge, because that we basically have entities across the river that are working with us on that. But I think as far as the other boards, I think sometimes boards can be, first of all, they use a lot of resources. You got Carrie Ann's got to come, Jeremiah's got to come, they all got to take minutes, they eat up resources, and they isolate a lot of the community from the decisions and a lot of the information that happens on advisory boards is either duplicate information that gets done at the advisory level and then gets duplicated again, also duplicating expense. And secondly, it isolates the community from seeing a lot of this, and sometimes a lot of that substantive information that happens at the advisory level doesn't get shared with the larger commission. And I think, as much as I think we will be much more efficient, that I don't know that having a lot of other advisory boards meeting in small committees and then basically boiling it down into, well, here's what we decided, and then have all you all rubber stamp what was decided elsewhere, which the community didn't get to be privy to, and you may have not gotten all the information about, makes it very difficult. So I think as much as we can, kind of close down some of those, the plethora of committees that we had and keep it to a minimum. Keep our extra time to a minimum and try to be as efficient as we can and be able to be transparent and share that with the rest of the community. I think it's probably a good idea. And then if we have to have an ad hoc committee for a specific purpose for a short period of time to address some fire that needs putting out, we can certainly do that. But
At our next business meeting, we're gonna have Mark Knudsen in November, I don't remember the exact month, but he's the one that put the commission policy manual in place. Which was, it's really good. There's also some things he thinks probably could be changed in there. He's gonna review that with you guys so you can go through it, understand it. And I think that'd be a good time to bring that up if it's something you guys are interested in, is how do we handle what used to be called subcommittees and other recommendation committees? When do we need them? Do we need all these ones here? So there'll be a good time to tackle that, probably the meeting next month.
okay.
From discussing with you, or from talking with you earlier, I like the idea of getting rid of the subcommittees. It brings us to more engagement with each other. It's more transparency to the community. And if there is any kind of homework that needs to be done and brought out, we can volunteer, even to work together and bring information back. So there's still ways to divide if we need to, but I
think this new format will be very good too, because we have a meeting of discussion and kind of like next steps. Okay, we've discussed this, give Jeremiah his walking orders and then come back to the next meeting, discuss it further. If then it warrants making a decision on, and we make a decision, and I think that's going to be a real efficient way to do things, and also a lot more transparent to the community. And obviously, my feeling is that the subcommittees didn't necessarily produce superior work, because we had our Sternweller subcommittee for 6 years. And I'd say some of the results might not have been, superior to what we can do right here.
And typically,
I've got one other
go
question.
ahead.
If the extra work that you guys are doing, is that gonna take away from hours or income that you're used to?
Might take away from their overtime.
That's what I mean, like, it's like if you get used to an income, are you gonna have to?
So with
There's
those
a plethora of
all
projects.
employees that aren't salary, we're 40 hours eject. So when they hit that 40 hours, they're out of here. Carrie Ann has no problem hitting her 40 hours every week. Sometimes we lose her on Fridays because she hits them so
I was
quick.
gonna say, or if you're used to Fridays off, that's
Yeah,
something
no,
I
that's
think
great.
we're considering.
Thank you for thinking about that.
So the longer we take care, the earlier you guys see them on Friday, do you want us to take longer? I have a couple, I guess, logistical questions as far as if we were to get rid of subcommittees. Would that impact anything that we're currently doing or anything that we've recently passed? And would it have any sort of impact on, I guess, getting any approvals or slow down anything from an approval process?
It wouldn't really slow anything down. Typically, it's been my approach, and we haven't been doing this very long, but it's been my approach that if I'm getting involved in something that I think I want commissioners to have eyes on, that I'm like, I give it up to you, say, hey, listen, I'm gonna go have this meeting. I think this is something that typically if I'm inviting you guys to come to something, it's because I think it's gonna eventually end up with the entire commission. So when we get to this discussion, if you heard something different than I heard, or you felt different about it, or whatever, that we've already sort of had an opportunity to hear it pitched once. So no, it shouldn't slow anything down. Potentially it will speed things up. To be
I
honest.
would say it will probably speed things up because what you're doing is getting a redundancy. Where you're doing something and it says, well, maybe this is something we should bring to the larger commission. You know, and so you get this application of both staffing and time, and multiple meetings, it just,
As Brad said, the only one that we may really consider, and at this point, it's not even actually an official subcommittee yet, or stop saying subcommittee. It's not an official recommendation committee yet because it hasn't had a charge created for it. That would be the bridge, and the bridge is part of a much longer discussion that needs to happen about the bridge and what it would mean to make a committee, and it's that we got a lot to talk about the bridge. So that'd be the only one I'd say stays, but then again, that can just go into the ad hoc as well, and hey, we need a committee, we create it, and when we're done with that project, they go away. And we will get really good direction from Mark on how to write that policy up. He'll do that for us, so.
I can definitely speak to being on subcommittees for 3 years. I've always felt it's a drawn out process. A lot of stuff does get repeated in the commission meeting, and it actually slows it down for, potential tenants or businesses. One of the benefits of getting rid of some of these subcommittees too is also encouraging more public comment attendance, because now we have one less meeting to voice your opinions as citizens in town. So I think efficiency is important, considering like all the different things we need to tackle this year too. So
I guess what are the pros of committees, if everyone's saying negatives about it?
There's some involvements, right? I mean, you have some involvement with.
You can leave out some weird.
Yeah, there's some economic development stuff that shows up, somebody wants to build water slides out here, right?
I think once we set our framework of where we're headed as a community and those things, some of those things will weed themselves out to the extent that Jeremiah can look at them and go, yeah, I don't think this is, this doesn't meet, it doesn't make the cut. Because it's not the direction that we wanna, that we've already determined we wanna go as a community, as far as livability, a type of business, or whether it's got, whether it's got potential.
And under our current policy, all subcommittees require 2 commissioners, so it's another commitment. I guess it'd be the same 2 on all of them, but it's another commitment for you guys. And they would at least meet monthly. Typically, sometimes we met twice a week. Economic development met twice a week. What's that? Twice a month, sorry. Twice a month. Yeah, twice a month. So it's another commitment, from commissioner side as well. I think the benefit of them is on some of the larger projects. It has an opportunity to continue to get work done by a different group of people, but it really has to come with a commission that respects what that team is doing. Because if it just comes to you guys and it's all, we regurgitate all this to you, right? There's a certain amount that you're sending those to committees so that you don't have to do the work. And when it gets here, the work's been done well, you hear what's said, and that has some sort of value to it. Previously, like, we'd come in here, finally get here, and it'd just be like starting over.
Right.
So.
And it could be that on our first of the week, first of the month meeting, we have those people show up to give us information, and then it's the next steps, it's just, how we're gonna organize the,
I would encourage, I think we'll definitely want to encourage public engagement at these meetings. There will definitely be some folks that feel like that was advice that they got to engage in the public. We had some people that participated in those quite a bit. So we want to make sure that opportunity goes away, that they know that there's a good opportunity for them to be involved here.
Yeah, there is one plus side to having the subcommittees, or at least myself being in them, is I learned a lot of experience of how the board operates without actually being elected official, so it's kind of a good preview and internship for anybody interested in government.
That is actually very true.
Mhm. But that's not to say the subcommittees are 100% vegetarian, again, just for special needs. There are gonna be projects pop up that are gonna require more of a hive mind than we can provide, so.
Say, okay, yeah, we got this special project going on until we get this thing figured out. We might have to do an ad hoc committee while we're doing this, you know, a particular project. Well, that's all I got on that.
Experience.
General manager report.
We are cooking. A lot of stuff gets covered, so. Format change, I think I will just publicly mention, obviously, we're doing it tonight, we've all are aware of this, but I don't know that we put it on our website that we were moving to this, but just that we have moved to having a business meeting at our first meeting. Action items typically won't come until the second meeting of the month. Allows us to focus, have longer discussions, get into the weeds a little bit if we want to, without constantly walking the clock. Remember, we've got to solve this and vote on it. Gives you guys time to go home, have conversations about those, sleep on it a little bit, and then come ready to make decisions at the next meeting. So I wanted to at least have that out there so the public knows that the meeting changes a little bit.
And you make conversations with you and not conversations with each other.
That's right. Bridge, it's always tricky when the meeting falls on the very first day of the month, so I don't have great numbers for you on the bridge, other than it was ridiculously busy in July, and I'm impressed. I mean, I think we might have hit like an all-time high for number of crossings on the bridge in July, so that's exciting for me. I still need to hire a toll taker. I'm still having some staffing issues up there. I'm taking a higher level look at what the long-term plan is for the booth. I know you guys
should have a
don't want
community barbecue on the bridge. That would be something different, wouldn't it?
I know you certainly don't want to see me up there waving traffic or sleeping in the booth. At this point, that's still the plan that's in place, but we're working to change that, and I'm working on it. We'll get there. Project for the stern wheeler has been completed, so all the ceiling tiles are in, all the floors have been put down, all the other epoxy floors are put in. It looks really good. I think some of us had a chance to go out and tour it. The projected grand opening will be the 18th of August. That's going to align with PCT days. So they're very excited to have the boat up down the river during PCT days. There'll be a soft opening before that. I don't have the exact date on it. We'll probably see them in the river next week. The Coast Guard is coming, and they're going through all their inspections and safety drills and all that stuff that they have to do. So we'll start to see it. We'll hear the whistle. The boat is on the water again. That's exciting.
I'll say that it looks fabulous. I went there this week, met with Steven, and he showed me around, and man, the new ceiling tiles, and while the ceiling tiles were out, he repainted all the grids and nice and shiny and gloss white on all the metal surfaces, and the new flooring and the epoxy, great. You know, boats looking really nice.
New audio.
As far as the stern wheeler ticketing, have they figured that out? And is there gonna be pre-sales before the 18th?
So that I don't know if they've locked in on, that's not true. I've been told that they've locked in on ticketing service. I don't know anything about it. I don't know when it will go live. I don't know how it works. I know that they're not currently yet selling tickets, but they did lock in on one. I didn't make it down to the boat today, but somebody told me that there was a booth down there, a ticketing booth. So they may have purchased a ticketing booth that they're gonna have on the dock. It's a follow-up for tomorrow, though, for sure. So I can give us some feedback on what we're doing with ticketing when we'll see that go live. Community garage sale was success. I was very happy. A lot of local businesses showed up very early in the morning and got a large quantity of the stuff. My big fear is that a big truck from Portland was gonna park there overnight, walk in and say, I'll take it all, and it was gonna end up being resold. So I was happy to see only local faces showed up for it, and it was a lot of the businesses that got stuff, and people trickled down through the day. We didn't make a ton of money on it. We might have made enough money to buy the dumpster to throw the other stuff away and dispose of, but it went to good homes, so that made me happy.
We still need it back.
August, we'll talk about events a little bit. It's a busy month. Bridge of the Gods run will be this weekend. That's one of our favorite events. It's operated by Chad Sperry. I'll have him in to give us a recap when it's over. Probably along with PC Days is one of our most tightly run, never run into a problem, goes off without a hitch, does everything right. events.
money,
He just does a great job at it, like the guy has just figured it out. So the bridge will be closed from 7:55 to 8:45 on that Sunday. There'll be a 10-minute gap where they allow cars to go through and then start the next race. My first year, I was so nervous about how that was gonna go, and then it went fine. And then the next year, I was like, all right, that had to have been a fluke. It was even better the next year. So he came in today and he asked me, do we need to talk? I was like, just keep doing what you're doing. So he's also had some interest in potentially doing some other events with us. He's really good at what he does. PCT days will be the third weekend in August. We'll meet again before then, so we'll have some more updates on what that looks like. The community picnic held in partnership with the city will be August 24th. Both the city and the port are allocating some staff time to that, as well as we make a financial contribution to it. But I know that they also need some volunteers. Their main volunteer and the head volunteer, maybe the only volunteer at this point, is Kathy Fallon. So if you guys have any time to, if you have any interest in helping do the planning on that, yeah.
I believe Course Canoe Club is adding a couple of volunteers.
Thank you, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
Course Canoe Club, which of course, right, when are they not volunteering for something? But I think Kathy would love to see some commission, obviously, you're gonna be welcome to watch you down there. I think she would love to see some participation from a volunteer standpoint. We also have the last movies in the park that evening. There's a movie in the park this Friday. This one was my pick, so I'm excited about that. I'll tell you after me, and I'll add the. But it was a superhero theme is what we had throughout it. So it's from the 70s. I'm excited. Actually, it's from what was that called? The 60s. Actually. What was that movie? You guys all. We're not allowed to. We buy the rights to show them, but part of those agreements say that we can't advertise what the actual title is. But usually it gets out or somebody hints at it or whatever. Multiple meetings going on, yoga here on Thunder Island. CGRA has their last clinic. I shot you guys over some emails about some conversation that's happening with CGRA. I think we'll see them here shortly to talk about what their contract looks like going forward. And probably, so we wanted to talk about that talk a little bit too. So Brittany and the rest of the staff have been ridiculously busy. As much as I looked great standing around selling stuff, that all came together with maintenance and Brittany. And really, I think all of the staff did some pricing on that. So Brittany, where she is applying for a grant it's a cybersecurity grant, it's $5,000. But did she reach out to you, Rob? On that? Did she reach out to you on that at all?
Yeah, I can give some advice on it.
Oh, very good. So
One quick correction about the community picnic, some with Friday, the 25th, not the 24th.
oh, thank you very much. I think that potentially we could maybe use that for the laptops that we got. Having you guys on equipment that's monitored by our IT staff and minimizes the ability for that. So I think we might get $5,000 for that. That'd be cool. That's all I've got.
I have a couple saved rounds if possible. I just wanted to talk to you guys about SDAO trainings coming up. I think we're all excited to attend them. Albert and I have picked out a couple dates that worked for us. However, I mean, if more of you want to join us for that and kind of how it looks like, I think it would be good to coordinate. I'm not really interested in staying in a hotel. I would rather leave early in the morning and then just come home that evening.
And that's in Salem on the 23rd or
23rd of this month, and then there's one in, is that the same one?
August, the same.
And then there's one in Astoria that we chose in September.
If you look at your emails, you got an email from Melissa. She's been out quite a bit the last 2 weeks, personal time. And we hope to have her back tomorrow, but she typically coordinates those for you, figures out which training you want to go to, pays for it, figures out accommodations if that's necessary. There's actually quite a few different options for meetings. There's a long list. One of those occurs at the Port of Morrow, and I would love for one of y'all to go to that.
When is that?
It's 13th. That would be a great one. So you guys can go and see.
Regardless of training or not,
Yep.
so I might, I don't think I can go to one on the 13th, so.
But Melissa will reach out to you guys on that, and just pick the ones that you want, and she'll book the hotels and get it all, it's in the hotel, if you don't, that's also fine, but don't hesitate, I mean, you guys have full-time day jobs and et cetera, so this is all money that gets budgeted for this training, we knew there was gonna be more with this group than the last group that was in office. And so they're one of the most important things that you can do as a port. Our need to network and understand what other ports are doing probably is higher than most other special districts, like the library district, they don't really, they come to a few ports, we need to be out there. We need to be hearing what other ports are doing, we need to hear tenants that potentially they were gonna work with, but it fell through. We need to hear issues that they ran through with their line dredging project, right? We have our hands in so many different things that's super valuable.
Port Morrow is.
And I'm expecting to put together some field trips for a couple of commissioners, hopefully all of us. And we can go see some of these super healthy, high functioning ports, and you can get sort of, if you haven't been to a different port, you kind of just know the Port of Cascade Locks. And it's the big joke within ports is if you've seen one port, you've seen one port, because they're all dramatically different and they all sort of approach this in a different way. And if we can go and see some of those ports and cherry pick the things that they're doing well, this is a great time for us to do it.
Port Morrow is like tumbleweeds and data centers and cold storage facilities, and they have thousands and thousands of square feet of buildings.
And that's the thing, some of the ports you'll go to, right, you'll go, okay, this is cool, it's like Disneyland, right? It's hard to see ourselves within this port, but we can maybe cherry pick a few things, but we can also go to some ports of our size. And when we go to the ports of our size, that becomes really helpful. Some of the bigger ports I've been to, I'm like, it's cool, it's really cool. I don't know what I see here for me. But some of these smaller ports of our size, there's lots of really cool things.
So the interesting thing, even like a big port like Port Morrow, is it wasn't all smooth. The process they went through to get where they are, there were some failures and there were some problems, and how they resolved them and how they continue to move forward. So, you know, there can be lessons learned from some of these big guys that have succeeded and
Also fair.
you know.
Sure.
Right.
They were actually a big, in 2018, they were a big manufacturer. They got $19 billion from the build grants, which billion, not million. So it seems like
They do very well.
Yeah.
At projects. They put, and most of the team, and most of the ports that you'll see that are high functioning and healthy are really well at getting projects done. They have somebody who's specialized in permitting and planning. They have people that are project management. They have grant writers, but that's all that they do, right? So there's a focus on some of those really healthy ports. Sure, yeah, I think so. I really hope that's the direction that we go.
As far as the SBO trainings go, just a couple of considerations I wanted to point out is that, I mean, we could all go together, but it would have bad optics because of the quorum thing. So I would highly recommend that we diversify and go to different ones, a couple of us at a time.
2 commissioners per vehicle.
Right, and then, I mean, the benefit of that is also just different networking opportunities for everybody that can collaborate and meet new people and kind of network at the different training locations, so.
A question as far as that quorum thing.
It's not impossible. The optics on it aren't great for multiple commissioners to be in the same vehicle together, to go to the same meeting together. If you don't discuss port business, then you're not very close. You guys are allowed to be friends. You're allowed to have barbecues together. You're allowed to fish. It's when you start deliberating, small towns, when you start, you're allowed to be neighbors. Good things.
Somebody just walked into the gorges, I cannot stand here and have a beer because somebody else.
Exactly.
Somebody else I know just walked in.
But the deliberating on port business is where it becomes a little more difficult to navigate in a training. So if you have 3 commissioners that are training and someone asks something specifically about what our port does, so if you say, well, our port does this, then that starts to get difficult. We saw the city navigate that by asking hypothetical questions. So hypothetically, if a port were, right, again, the optics aren't great on it, but I would still I would still err on the side of this is an important training they need to go to. We're going to sit far away. We're going to do all the right things. We're aware of it. It's mostly just being aware of it. Like you guys, you guys will notice it than more other people do. I mean, there'll be people who are looking for it, right? But usually they'll come up, and if you're not talking about core business, then there's nothing for them to.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think it's almost a waste of time for everybody to go to the same meeting, because you can share information. Go home that evening, write up a one-page report of what happened and share it with the rest of the report, or with the rest of the board. And it's done the same with other trainings.
And again, with that networking, I think is,
Mhm.
you know, really the most valuable tool. And each training is gonna have different people to network with, so.
Yeah, I would take a look at the cities, each of the cities, and pick something you like out there that might work out here in Cascade Locks, and then maybe consider attending that area to network, you know.
Well, we've already picked ours.
Yeah, and some of
So you guys go pick your own.
this, and these first trainings that we talked about with SDAO, we should all go to those ones. These are newly elected officials training. So it's all the base knowledge of stuff that you want to have just as a newly elected official.
When is it?
Well, there's like 6 options, but I
Did
would go to just.
Did you email it?
Melissa.
Gotten into my email.
Melissa did.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll come from
The
Melissa.
one that Karen and I are going to, are you going to, Jim?
You might be going to report tomorrow now.
Oh, gotcha. The first one is August 23rd in Salem.
Yeah, no, I'm backpacking that week.
You can't do it, we'll be.
There's other options.
There's a
Take a look, see one you like. We'll do.
Oh, yeah, they go through like October or something.
Great.
But I can forward you the email from Melissa if you didn't get it. I think she sent it before you guys were appointed.
Well, double check that. I'll forward it right now to make sure it's there for sure. Actually, I'll screenshot it and I'll send it to you via your phone, so you don't have to wait for your email to come.
One last thing I had, just wanted to, while everybody's in the room, bring up is the email we received from our tenants. Looking to discuss their lease extension and stuff. I know, I just want to make sure that it's on our radar and that we're not dropping that off our radar right now. It's something that needs to be discussed. They're a very good tenant and we need to review the numbers. You and I already talked about that today, getting some numbers together to look so that we can make a more informed decision.
So that's probably, so one, that didn't come, sorry, I said that. That didn't come to me, right? I didn't get that, I didn't get that email, so there was no opportunity for me to evaluate that and bring that. If this is something that the commission wants me to do, then the commission should probably make, at least, we should probably have a motion for me to go back and review that. It's already been done, right? And so I want to make sure that the entire commission has me do that. And it isn't just, right? And that's sort of the problem with somebody going direct to the commission, right? Is it gets a little sort of, right? So thank you for bringing my attention that it didn't come to me. I would have brought it to you for sure. And then it would have got a motion from you guys to either work on it or not work on it, give you the background and the history on it. But if it's coming down to me, then it needs to come down.
If we need to table it for the next meeting, that's totally fine. I just want to make sure if yours on the agenda, that's something that we can discuss as a group and that it's being publicly mentioned, so the said tenant doesn't feel that we're ignoring them.
That's great.
Happy to add that.
If you'd like to appear on agenda, President's welcome to do that.
And in the future, it's probably good to respond to that email with the fact that it should be channeled through our management staff.
Yeah, I can reply. I'll just add Jeremiah to the chain.
But yeah,
I
A lot of
forwarded it
folks,
to
or yeah,
him.
folks don't know too, and it feels like a faster route and blah, 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 but yeah, if you see something that went, especially if it wins the entire commission.
I mean, I only got your access to my email today, so.
good deal.
Typically,
A lot of emails can get fun.
36.
and everybody's aware of reply all being an absolute no-no to emails.
Right.
Okay, right, yeah. That's all I got. for you.
That's
I'm
why.
pretty sure he copied all of us.
Okay, we have wider, I'm sorry, wider.
Reply all, if you will go back to the entire commission, which then becomes
Quorum.
a quorum, which are now an illegal, it's now an illegal meeting.
Public record,
Gotcha, okay.
It's the same as having a group meeting.
Right. Gotcha.
Or replying to the texts
Gotcha.
and stuff, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is why I'm like, this is a group message.
Don't
Right,
reply.
I'll reply. I assume you guys know not to.
Okay. This is the night when commissioners get to talk about
Yeah, this is,
Going on,
so on number
anything that
Number seven, it's always a thing, it's sort of, it's something that the city's done and always done, it's something that this port has done and always done. Usually you guys belong to different subcommittees, so you report on your subcommittees. It's a thing that we can continue to do if we like it, or we all go around and talk about what we want to.
Or this is a time when if there's just something in particular you want to talk about, if you want to announce PCT days or something's going on with or anything else. Or like you just brought up with tenant, that's time where we can kind of say, hey, this or that's going on, or this is something we want to mention, and bring out the community, otherwise. We'll kind of go, okay, anybody want to say anything of note?
I would like to request, and not immediately, but just a list of projects, floating projects right now that are going on.
That would be helpful.
Like what Mark is doing, he seems to report on certain things, and if we could get a list of everything and a status of maybe green, yellow, red, just.
Definitely. Everybody want to see? Great,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay, and it doesn't have to be by next meeting, whenever you get to it, it's just something that will be helpful in the future.
Graphs, coloring pages, pull outs, things like that, those are all.
Oh, Brittany's getting very excited.
I heard.
We have
Crossword puzzle of the ports.
We have whittled down a lot of them. We also have sort of ongoing projects that have been going on for 8 years. The bridge is one of them, right? It's constantly being worked on. But we'll get you exactly which of them. I know what you're looking for. We'll get that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Is there anything else?
But we whittled it down a lot.
Just a comment about Mark Johnson's, second point about EV chargers. I think it's a great idea. The company you mentioned, Forth, FORTH, last year, they launched their pilot program in Hood River. And they had really affordable electric cars there, for like $5 an hour, very, accessible. So I could see the opportunity for Ford providing those type of rental cars in our town if we have the infrastructure and chargers for that,
The hikers would probably love that.
Yeah,
Have access
And,
to-
that would probably encourage more carpooling and, getting less cars on the road, we're all, in 26, I think Toyota is releasing like 13 different EV models, so you're gonna see a big change in the car market in the next couple of years, so.
Anything else?
That's it, cool.
For me, I agree with Rob here. I think I like the idea of those EV chargers in that area. And I guess speaking of just electric and moving forward, we all now have phones, we all have computers. Are there other ways that we can digitize things within the port? I know the accounting has been quite a thing. Is
Yes.
there a way that we can start moving toward that?
So-
And additionally, we discussed this briefly, but also even the bridge. I know that there's oftentimes a lot of backup because of just the slow transaction process.
Yeah.
There are other ways that we can speed that up.
So we haven't been able to find any way to speed the bridge up from a technical standpoint. Part of the problem that we have on that doesn't mean we can't go back and try again, right? It's a priority. We'll just keep looking, but it is something that we've looked at. The way the booth sits on the bridge doesn't allow us to do license plate recognition. It doesn't have enough time for it to find the license plate when it's coming up that circle. It can do it the other direction and find it coming. The place where much as I hate to say this because you can always just put another sign up, we could do a better job with signage of having people having their money ready. That is really what takes the longest up there is they pull up and they go, what do I do? Like, there's a sign at the bottom that told you to give you $3. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, has anybody ever thought about like selling tickets for the bridge in town? Like you can get two-way passes or something like that, and
The Breeze Buy system replaced the coupon system. So we used to have a coupon system where we sold coupons. I can't speak to how much faster that was or wasn't. I know that from an administrative standpoint, there was a lot more work to do with selling those coupons, but on the back side of selling those coupons, and then there was a price change on the tolls, that those have to be gray. It becomes a little bit crunchy that way.
Just thinking of like visitors that come in and want to go over, they can just buy a two-way, you know,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Over and back. I could run the numbers, it would be an interesting analysis to do. We could run the numbers and see what it meant to charge a $6 toll one way. Right? Clearly there's gonna be people that go and don't come back, right? But we could take a look and see what that looked like. I mean, I know exactly how many people cross that bridge at any given time and what that would do to our financials if we did. It's very close. It's almost even, it's very close.
In addition to that, I've heard some community members talk about having an annual pass for the bridge and also for the parking.
But all the locals that would do an annual pass have a breeze by, so.
I think
Like
Ray
there'd be a way to
said we
do
need
like
to figure out how to put
a digital coupon or something where you just hold your phone up and it would have the digital coupon and you have a scanner that then. You know, they could just hold out their phone. I don't know if that's possible. It seems like, you know, like the QR code.
Yeah.
If you had a digital QR code that you know, kind of an app or something that you just pre-buy the $3 thing on your phone. And
Well, BreezeBuy could actually just send you a different sticker with a different code and product tied to it. And I'm sure in the software you can change it to recognize as an annual pass versus.
people who are
Hey,
paying by credit card, holding up the lines are the ones that aren't gonna have the foresight to buy ahead of time, and
Yeah,
people that have the foresight already have the.
or we're gonna be like me, they're such technical that they can longer figure out how to do the QR code than it would be to find the money.
So my question
You
was,
get the money from under your seat.
my question was more like not for us to solve this right now, but for more just. Not just moving to the digital world as far as the port's concerned, only for the bridge. I'm talking about everything else that we are.
Paper free
Beautiful
agendas,
piece of
paper free
paper.
everything.
And it also goes back to a lot of the, I guess, the historic records that we have.
Yeah.
Any way that we can move forward with that.
There are a number of different things that we could be doing that we could make digital. There are probably a number of jobs that could be done at the port from home. And they don't have to actually be on site. There are online QuickBooks, which would allow for some of that stuff. So yes, there's a lot of ways that we can modernize the way the port is doing business.
Yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
To your point about the bridge backups. So our previous commission was always very reluctant to waive traffic through. The responsibility to waive traffic through is always lied with the operations manager or the general manager. Typically, we were waiting until ODOT would reach out to us or WASDOT would reach out to us, and they'll tell us, hey, listen, you guys got to open traffic up. And when we do that, they pay for the tolls for anybody that gets waived through. But currently, I have the ability to waive traffic. I've been testing that tolerance a little bit to see how quickly we can get the lines to go down, how much it backs up onto 14. And I'll have a report back with you guys and show you exactly how much money we lost, how long the backups were, how quickly we were able to clean them up and those sorts of things.
And how many angry emails you get?
How many angry
Well,
emails?
you know, how does that affect BreezeBuy customers too, because they're gonna have to pay what other people are getting through for free.
And I typically, I get more waves and smiles from the BreezeBuy customers than anything. They're just like, this is what I bought and paid for, was to BreezeBuy this thing, and now I'm stuck, what's the point of it? I will get definitely a few people that call and say, hey, listen, but for the most part, I think that them just seeing the line move makes them happier than the fact that that person didn't get charged $1.25, but it is something we have to look at. It's a slippery slope when you start waiving tolls.
I thought of a question in terms. Did they backfill your position before your operations?
Yeah, that the operation position is still open, and we haven't gone out yet.
Are you suffering any difference?
No. I mean, I will need to fill it. I need to look at that title and what the job description looks like. There are some things that I was good at that is going to be handy to have the general manager be good at, that I won't need to have an operations manager anymore. I've also passed a few things off to Chuck in terms of contract management, which is something that operations had done. So I'm looking at that operations role and seeing exactly what that job description is gonna look like.
Yeah,
And then we'll likely come back to you guys with what I think a new job description looks like, and we'll talk at it, but yeah, no, right now, we're still missing somebody.
okay, thanks.
I'm done.
I'm done.
We all heard my spiel
Okay.
earlier.
I have nothing other than this is great, you know, I think, the dialogue between the commissioners and, it's fantastic, and, I think, we'll do great things. Great. If there's nothing further, I will, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned, we are adjourned.
Appreciate it.
All those in favor?
Promote A.
Aye.
Anybody want to stay and swelter support?
He,
No, I've got.
he has